Az, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for inviting me.
No, you're welcome. Your career in the industry has spanned roughly 30 years, and you've worked across architecture, development, and now you're leading design for one of the UK's largest house builders. Looking back, was there a defining moment that set you on this path, or has it been a series of opportunities that gradually sort of led you here?
So I think my journey started when I was quite young, really. So I was always kind of drawn to sort of art and maths. So I found those two things quite enjoyable, quite natural, and didn't really know what that meant at the time. But I did enter this kind of Home of the Future competition when I was, I think when I was about 12. It was like a national competition. You kind of had to imagine, going back about, I don't know, nearly 40 years, what a home of the future might look like. So I was kind of designed this house back then and designed what appliances, how they might work in the future. And out of that national competition, I didn't win, unfortunately, but I came second. So it was kind of, I think that it was that pivotal moment. There was like, I might have a bit of a knack at sort of house design in some way, but there was something about that kind of maths side and the intersection of art and maths that kind of drew me to, that was also very interesting and drew me to sort of how things work and how you do house design. So I think around then I was like, I should be an architect. This is something really that really resonates with me. So I think maybe when I was about 12 years old, I kind of that's kind of when I got the urge to be an architect. And so then I studied. I went on that journey. Just went through college and did art and maths because they're really good, and physics as well because they're good subjects to as a backdrop to a future career in architecture. Went to university, got my first job at a developer, actually, not an architect's practice. I think I was like the first person in the family to do architecture. I didn't really have anyone to kind of guide me as to what a good practice looks like or anything. So I ended up just getting the first job, the first interview that offered me a job. I kind of took it, as you do, for next to no money. So I won't say who the developer was, but it was just in case. But but I really enjoyed my time at this developer. Really sort of really getting into the nuts and bolts of building design. I just thought that's what you do. And actually, after that was my year out experience, and then I went back to uni, finished off my diploma, then went to work in an architectural practice, and it was very different. That kind of attention to detail, perhaps it was different. It just wasn't as obsessive about the detail. I guess it was more bigger picture thinking.
Why do you think that was in terms of the difference between sort of development architecture, or developer being an architect or designer within a developer, and then being a designer in an architect's firm? What do you think the difference there was?
I think what I was learning inadvertently was the importance of optimization and deliverability, and making this obsession with making sure things actually work. So with that kind of mindset, it was actually, I think it was probably a little bit refreshing for an architectural practice when I joined, because I just approached it in that way. Look, everything must stack. Why aren't these things stacking? Have you thought about soil stacks? From a very young age, I was kind of already sort of in that mindset that let's not draw something that doesn't actually isn't efficient or isn't optimized.
More of a commercial grounding.
Yeah, so that's what happened. Yeah, so by happy accident, I got really commercial grounding, and then I just always applied that to architecture. But in architecture, I spent about 10 years. So I had really good mentors, you could say, that really, alongside my university tutors, like really architects that are doing amazingly well, like May Architects, Karakusevich Carson, some really heavy hitters now. That we were really fortunate with education and guidance on how to think about architecture. But I think going back to architecture, then in the practices that I worked in, really shaping my thoughts around what good master planning might look like, how to approach building design, how to be sensitive to the local area, how to think about connection of your site to the wider estate, how to bring it to sort of a human scale. So I guess it's more the art side of it. And so that I did that for about 10 years, and then an opportunity just came up. It was actually at the worst time to move a job, because it was during the 2008 credit crunch, and Barratt were just interviewing for, I guess, someone with some architectural experience that could come in, and I think Barratt London had rebranded, and I think the desire was to really become like the number one developer in London, and I think there was this desire to ensure that everything that was being sort of conceived at planning stage was actually deliverable and could smoothly transition into the delivery teams and actually remain viable and not need much change, because the what you want to do is always design what you're going to build when you're planning. So I guess they just wanted to ensure that process just happened much more smoothly. So I joined in a technical environment within Barratt's, did that for a number of years. Really found that the land and development team was quite a seductive sort of place. I just looked at what those guys did and thought, I think I can do that, because it's not too far off from what I'm doing anyway. I'm really thinking about the whole design and thinking about the whole of the building design and master planning. But I think the only difference is that I really want to manage the whole team. Just overseeing the architect is great, but I really want to know how it all comes together. So Barratt were brilliant. They offered me the opportunity to be a development manager. Worked on a couple of really significant schemes at Barratt's. Both went phenomenally well. There were three actually. There was a big site in Catford Stadium. The old Catford Stadium, redeveloped that site there. Had to reimagine that site as housing. Then a really complicated Greenbelt site in Mill Hill, and then a really complicated site in the middle of Camden where the old Morrison's was and is being rebuilt at the moment. Actually, unfortunately, we didn't end up developing it, but Barclays are doing a brilliant job of it instead. So, but that planning permission was hugely complicated and difficult to get. But each of those schemes went phenomenally well, and I think perhaps it was because I approached it through a design lens rather than a project management lens. I don't know, I'm assuming, but I think whatever it was, the business felt that, actually, because these have gone well, perhaps there is there's something that we can apply from that approach and apply it to all the schemes. So after a few years of doing that, I then transitioned into sort of a head of design role where I could apply my sort of architectural background to that. And I've been doing that ever since.
You're overseeing sort of design across the organization. And one of the things that I always find particularly interesting is how you balance the various different priorities and directions that you're being pulled in, because obviously you want to design and build good homes. and you want to build homes, you want to build communities, and there's a hell of a lot on that side. But then you have the other side of it, which is the sort of commercial business side, and that you're being pulled in that direction as well, because as developers there's an extreme amount of outlay, and
Yeah.
you don't see your money until the end, right? Once you're selling your unit. So how do that your role is it covers so many different elements. How do you manage the teams and get everyone pulling in the same direction?
I wouldn't say it's all me. It's not all me. We've got some really amazing, talented people in our team. So I think I guess the magic sauce is probably just to sort of lay out what our priorities are from the outset. So obviously we've got to deliver homes. That's a given. But how do we? What is it beyond that we really want to do? And we know we want to create really sustainable communities. I think we have an obligation to lead the industry. I mean, the volume at which we're building, we should really aspire to do the very best that the industry can do, because if we can do it at scale, then it will bring the cost down and encourage smaller builders to do the same thing, and it will drive the industry in a more positive sort of net zero direction. But then it's not just carbon and energy, which are super important, but health and well-being of our residents as well. I think that's been kind of overlooked. So I think that these are the ideas that we've kind of been developing over a number of years. Like how do we do that at scale, but it still makes sense commercially. So I think what I've found is, by some kind of happy accident, there is, or maybe not, maybe it's kind of planned, but there's the R&D side of the business has been really pivotal in helping shape the future direction of the business. So I think when we first cottoned on, for instance, that there might be something called like the Future Home Standard that was going to land, took a while to come, but I think we started looking at that maybe 2-3 years ago, and we were like, okay, look, buildings have got really super complicated. What does this Future Home Standard mean, and what would we do if we didn't know what we know already? So rather than just reacting to new standards and bolting on more and more complexity, let's park all of that. Let's start from scratch. And I think the pivotal moment was when we introduced building physicists into the mix. So we
just for our listeners, what's a building physicist?
So building physicist is someone that I guess can really analyze using physics and maths, how a building will perform, and they will use all sorts of tools such as as PHPP modeling and SAP calculations, and they'll be really au fait with how to calculate overheating, daylight, how air moves around that flat, and they'll be able to sort of pull all that stuff together, including like how, the performance of your fabric, your windows and all of that, and help you fine tune all of those things until you've got sort of an optimum solution. And once we incorporated that, because normally a design team would consist of your architect, your M&E engineer, your structures, and people will just approach it in a very business as usual kind of way.
Was the traditional way of doing it, right?
Yeah.
As you say, that's been the way for decades.
Yeah, and it makes sense why that happens, because as a business, especially of this size, we need to be able to have repeatable solutions. So if you've done something for a number of years, you kind of know how it's done, and you've got good at it. You know, this whole point around skills and training, you know, the lack of it, you know, let's not reinvent the wheel, because, you know, there might not be skills available in the marketplace to help us deliver those things. So look, it makes absolute sense. But once we threw everything we knew out of the window and started again, we found actually there's a much simpler, better solution. Look, what we should be doing is, rather than just building regulations compliant buildings and then adding on low carbon technologies into that, why don't we just do a really good job of the fabric? And when we do a good job of the fabric, let's do really good window design. You know, let's really look at how the sunlight comes in, how ventilation works around that, how it contributes to overheating, and how do we mitigate all of those problems and balance all of these different regulations to a point where it's really optimum, so that we're designing out the issues that we normally would have to deal with through, you know, air conditioning or whatever. You know, like most buildings now will need aircon, because, you know, temperatures have just gone that way, and it's kind of a necessity now, because we're going to have more and more heat waves going forwards. So once we realise, oh, we can block out all of this energy, but we can still get adequate daylight, and we, you know, if we do this with the windows, then we can, you know, really ventilate these apartments, purge ventilate them really easily. Oh, but look, now we hardly need any energy. And what does that mean? Well, that means we don't need complicated heat network systems anymore. So we can design all of that complexity out. And I think what we landed on was that, actually, to ensure that we deliver on that, on those solutions, that Passivhaus was a really nice wrapper to ensure that we can apply that rigor and get a certification at the end that achieve those goals. So so that's kind of how we landed on that. So how do we? It's a really long-winded way of getting to the answer, but so that gives you an idea about how we've got to the solutions that we get to. It's through sort of R&D, but then it's a big ship to steer. You know, there are two significant divisions that deliver our homes for us, and we've got another very significant regional team that get planning permission. So decisions we make at day one really affect, you know, everything. It all sort of waterfalls down through the business, and the only way to sort of ensure that messaging translates across and we are able to steer the ship is through standardization and you know, really robust briefing documentation and continual training and education and CPDs and, you know, things like that. Also, I can't underline the importance of working with experienced design teams. You know, there's no point in getting the cheapest quote, and, you know, but that person's got no experience of doing that task. What I massively advocate, especially when we're stepping into new territory like Passivhaus, is make sure that you've got a really experienced design team that have been there, made the mistakes, know how to overcome them, know exactly how to help you achieve your goals, and then continue that design team all the way through. So you have some kind of design guardianship, because there's one of me and I can't be everywhere all the time. And there are multiple projects going off simultaneously. So if you have the right team and you continue them through a project, then you have that, you know, that golden thread of knowledge that can keep projects on track.
That's like your, you know, that expertise, that golden thread you just mentioned there. It's like your moat. From listening to you talk there, as you're talking about potentially a complete restructure almost of the way the business does business, if that makes sense. Like, you can't, it's like most things. If you're going to actually do something and embrace it, it has to follow through the whole business. It can't just be a small part of it. You know, you
That's
have
right.
to embrace it in its entirety. And
That's
by
right.
the sound from what you're saying there, this was something that Barratt or Barratt Redrow, as you guys are now, have completely. You've remodeled the way the business works, and that takes a lot of to step away from the traditional methods or the traditional way of house building. That's quite a move because there's a lot at stake there, right? I mean, this isn't a company that's just coming up and has the opportunity to feel out what it's doing and change the way, and tweak because no one really knows who they are. The stakes are fairly low. This is a big
Big
beast.
organisation, absolutely. And I think the that job is made a little bit easier actually, because I mean it does seem like an overwhelming task, but it's much easier when the people above you also share that vision. So I think that was a really beautiful moment for me when we'd done this R&D, we'd positioned we'd really thoroughly done the research to demonstrate that this makes absolute sense for us. But I was very, very conscious that I might go into a meeting with the board and be told, as what are you doing? Like, we're a developer. We need to. These schemes need to be deliverable. Passivhaus just seems expensive. Like, what are you doing? And actually, it was the complete opposite. They just got it. They were like, yeah, this makes absolute sense. Why have we not been doing this for years? Why are other developers not doing this? The fact that we have potentially a solution that we can repeat at scale, that delivers homes that are future-proofed, like heat wave resilient, that are healthier, that are comfortable to live in. These are only things that are just going to differentiate us in the market as well. Like we want to be the developer of choice. So it was just a really refreshing kind of place that we'd got to. I mean, for me, it was personally like phenomenal that everyone all the way up to CEO level were like, yes, this makes absolute sense. Let's do it. And within sort of, I don't know, a couple of months of presenting our low E strategy is what we call it, the low energy. We were in UK Reef the year before we met to announce that was going to be the future direction of all of our multi-story schemes in London. So it's when you have that kind of buy-in from senior leadership, it makes my job a lot easier, because that vision is then disseminated throughout the business, and then everyone sort of comes on board. But I've got to say that I was expecting people to go, oh no, like we don't want to change, But I mean, I've been to a couple of meetings. It's been a little, honestly, a little bit emotional for me, because for me it's been like 3 years of work, behind the scenes doing R&D and that kind of stuff. But I went to a technical meeting. I remember, like one of our divisions, our West London division, had took their whole team and for a series of presentations, and everyone was talking about their sites, and they had a whole section on our low energy approach and our and Passivhaus and what it is. And I sat there and I was just thinking, wow, like these guys have like totally embraced it and they're really into it. And it was a little bit emotional, honestly, for me. Like I was blown away that it's not just me banging on about it, but everyone's kind of bought into the vision and believes in the vision, and they're actively doing their best to deliver it. All the stuff they're doing is phenomenal. All the testing, all of the skills and education stuff they're doing on sites, it's mind blowing. So I think if it's just such a, the vision is, it's not about money. It's about our residents. And once you've kind of cemented that vision, the whole organization gets behind it, and actually it gets much easier to deliver.
you mentioned there, it's something, it's an idea, or it's something that you've been very passionate about, and you've pushed it through, and the leadership have bought into it. And I wonder how much, having dealt with with house builders myself and developers, there are, and we harp on about this, but the fact is the majority of them are extremely commercially minded. It's about the bottom line. So you having that commercial grounding way back when has perhaps allowed you to sell it in, for want of a grubby term, into leadership in a way that, okay, yes, perhaps the initial outlay over the next 1 to 5, however many years, will be more, but ultimately, where we're actually going to be making savings and delivering on our sustainability promises on net zero is past that 5-year mark. So you're getting that back anyway. And it has to be a great idea, right? And what you've done is phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. And to get it into such a big organization, with where the stakes are high. And I'll just, I from what you've said there, that commercial background, I think, must have helped.
Yeah, 100%. Like I've definitely learned over the years, like the best idea in the world is pointless if it can't be delivered. So I'm super conscious of that. So yeah, we definitely did our quite a thorough piece of cost planning in the background to behind the scenes to support the research. So we had to look at I think in the industry the engineers call it counterfactuals. So we had to look at every separate permutation of the way you could do a building to achieve the outcomes, the energy outcomes and the carbon outcomes that we're aiming for, and we kind of demonstrated actually that commercially it's completely viable to do this. And I think there's something unique about multi-story schemes that I hadn't appreciated before any of this work, but that because multi-story schemes, and particularly in London, they tend to be kind of rectangular extrusions. They naturally have really excellent form factors, and form factor is a really important metric in determining how easy it will be to achieve a passive house outcome. So where we're doing multi-story schemes that are, fairly rectangular, the leap to get from business as usual to passive house isn't that big at all. So, and actually, once you've done your fabric really efficiently and perfectly, you can then start to shed lots and lots of MEP and distribution, mechanical and electrical plant, basically. So substations and things like off-site reinforcement. Because you need less energy, you now don't need to get off-site reinforcement. Get access to additional energy, which comes at a huge cost. Because your buildings are much lower carbon, you don't have as much carbon offset payments. In a site where you may have had to do a heat network before, which is the way the current London plan mandates energy in London, that when you get over a certain size, then you should be plugging into a heat network or doing a communal district heating system. What we found was that you can do away with all of that. So all your horizontal duct work, so all the pipes underground, all the service risers, they all go. All the substations out the ground floor, they all go. We used to have like really heavy, noisy plants on roofs, like air source heat pumps, that all go. And all of a sudden, you've got all this space in your building that you can now commercialize effectively. So all of those, although passive house in itself might cost a bit more, there is maybe more air tightness that you have to worry about. There's more rigor, there's more testing. But what you offset means that you can either be cost neutral or be better. Now, I don't know whether that will transpire in the first scheme that we do or not, time will tell, because we're all learning together. We will make some mistakes, but I think by the second scheme we'll be really good at it. So, and we'll start to see all those benefits.
Passivhaus, where, in terms of its journey, how far away is it already being implemented on certain schemes, or if not, when will it be? What's the timeline?
So we have got already 3 significant schemes sort of on the drawing board, going through Gateway 2 at the moment. So which has been phenomenal, really, because it's been extra hard, because we've been working against the GLA policy on energy, because as I mentioned, they have a policy around heat networks, and so we're not doing that. So there's been a huge amount of justification that we've had to do, and it's understandably, and also with local authorities as well. Some have been really receptive, but some have needed a bit more hand holding just to get them up to speed with what this all means and why we're making the change. So we've got 3 significant schemes. They're all joint venture schemes with our TfL partner, Places for London. And so we've got Bollow Lane in Ealing. We've got a site in Cockfosters and by the station. And we've got a site next to High Barnet Station. All have committed to be Passivhaus. I think the first completions are due 2029. So, so we're on it. Yes. So yeah, we're moving at speed.
And are you seeing this type of approach, or do you see it being taken up by your competitors eventually? I mean, it seems like you've stolen a bit of a march here, right? But do you see this being something that ultimately the industry will have to adopt in one way or another?
Yeah, I think people are going to see us doing it and naturally be super curious as to how we've achieved it, because everyone will have be coming to this approach with preconceptions of what Passivhaus is, and everyone will have to do their own research. What we get through our supply chains with our buying power might be a little bit different to someone else's. So we'll see how it works out today. But I know certainly other developers have started looking at it. The bigger names. I probably wouldn't be right for me to say who I know they are, but because they're on their own journey. But yeah, definitely since the announcement, I've had a lot of phone calls from various developers, housing associations, who genuinely want to do better as well. And they're like, well, can you come and explain to us how you've made this work? And, I think that, if we put the commercial bits and pieces to one side, I pay X amount for this insulation, which is understandably commercially sensitive information. The nuts and bolts of how we approach it in terms of a complete building solution, that we should be sharing. That should be kind of open source, because there's only one planet and we've kind of all got to save it together. So there's no point in us kind of ring fencing a good idea, because I passionately believe that this is moving the dial in the right direction. Better buildings has to be part of the equation going forwards, and so I'm very open to explaining what we do, what are the components of it, such as a Passivhaus requires NVHR in as part of it, but we've gone down an exhaust air heat pump route for certain technical reasons. So it's kind of educating people, how you do ducting, how you do windows, that all of that stuff. I'm hoping to do more of, a bit more knowledge sharing and thought leadership, I guess, around that area, just so we can bring the whole industry along with us.
Before we hit record, we mentioned about you were at Future Build. Did you have a speaking commitment there?
Yeah. So I spoke alongside the Passivhaus Trust. Yeah.
So there you are. So sort of the thought leadership and spreading the word, as it were, and trying to educate and help others.
Yeah. That,
That's cool. I like that.
no, yeah, absolutely, it is cool. And I never thought I'd be in a situation like this either. So it's really nice, actually. Like it's kind of reignited a passion for building in me, you know, because yeah, we were doing the same thing over and over again. So, you know, this kind of change in this direction is really, it's been really special, to be honest. But yeah, but even at Future Build, you know, the number one question is always, commercially, how have you made this work? So it isn't a lack of people not wanting to do it. I think people are just apprehensive of the cost of it. So as soon as you start to explain that, you know, maybe actually you might even be able to do it cheaper than what you do today, then, you know, people start to take it a bit more seriously. So I think you'll start to see more and more developers doing this. In fact, I know we're kind of not entirely unique or first to the table, because there is a scheme in Agar Grove that's there've been a number of phases, and I think the most recent phases are doing something very synonymous with what our strategy is. Maybe not exactly, but, you know, the groundwork has been set by others, you know, on a smaller scale in other places. It's just that we've optimized it and fine-tuned it and then called it low energy buildings. But yeah.
Put your stamp on it.
Yeah, we've put our stamp on it and got our own blueprint for how to do it.
Guys, you know, if there are any developers out there listening, you know, and this is something that you've been thinking about, Az has just said that he's prepared to give you his complete strategy. Or maybe just go and listen to one of his speeches. A notepad and pen. It might save you a lot of time and money.
100%.
In terms of like the future, if we move on to, you know, 15, 20 years time, say, Az, where do you ultimately see house building going? As in, you know, where it needs to go, absolutely, but where we may actually end up, and what you see at the moment as the biggest sort of obstacles to getting there.
Yeah. So I think the obstacle one I'll think about as I'm explaining where I think we're going to get to. But, you know, there's certainly things that I feel we are heading towards, things like, you know, more passive homes, you know, homes that are, you know, sort of fabric first, think a lot harder about solar shading, you know, that's going to be really fundamental. Not just dialing up the you know, the G value of the glass, because there's only so far you can go before it becomes a dark and dingy flat. So, you know, looking to Europe much more, the way they do shutters on the outside, for instance, ceiling fans, that kind of thing. So, you know, starting from a passive standpoint, I think is definitely something I can see the industry shifting towards. I think also measuring the quality and the actual performance of homes, because I think over the past decade, ever since I've worked in 30 years even, you know, that we design to regulation, but we have no idea whether it performs ultimately the way we designed it. And I think in the few instances that people do measure how well the home performs, you find that there is a performance gap. So what you thought you were building might not have been built quite to the quality that you had intended, and then you get a performance gap. And I think even, you know, if you get an EPC for your home, it says, oh, your bills will be £200 a year, and actually it's quite different in reality. So I think there will be, going forwards, there'll be homes that say these will be your bills, and that will actually be your bills, because we'll be measuring a lot more, and we'll be sort of figuring out why there was a performance gap and fixing that gap. So there'll be a lot more emphasis on that. Repeatability, so, you know, off-site manufacture, standardization, standard details, tested systems. so that we can build with confidence that, if we want to do a balcony on the edge of that slab and have a door on it and have fire stopping, that, if we pick that system, that all that work is done, and we are sure that that is easy to build and will conform with all regulation, and will, we won't have problems with it in the future. That sort of systems approach, I think, is where certainly we would like to go to, and I'm sort of seeing that the industry is also starting to shift in that direction. I think also maybe more like of a whole life thinking about buildings, not just point of sale. So we've obviously with the Passivhaus and Lowy, we've made, I'm hoping, going to be quite a significant dent in operational energy and carbon. But then you've got things like embodied carbon as well to deal with. So I think as the industry starts to really get more comfortable with operational energy energy metrics, we will start to shift to embodied and really start to think about, do we really need to use as much stuff in our buildings as do we need to put all that plasterboard everywhere? Can we squeeze buildings down a little bit? How do we get concrete out of our frames? All that sort of stuff, so that our sort of carbon footprint of the materials we use is much less. And how can we source all of this more locally as well, rather than importing truckloads of it from Europe or further afield. Obviously, technology, don't need to sort of explain what a significant impact AI is having on the world at the moment, but I can really see the implementation of AI to kind of really optimize how efficiently a home works. So I have this kind of dream, like you walk in through your front door, the house knows your home. It kind of turns on the heating just 10 minutes before you arrive home. I know that happens already, but imagine you sat down and all the lights went off. It knows that you're about to read a book, and a little lamp comes on next to you. Your dishwasher breaks, and you just say, I don't know, Jarvis, my dishwasher's broken, it's got error code 7. It knows all the appliances in your home. You don't need to wade through a book or find, where's my home user manual from 5 years ago. It just knows your home, and it can assist you in sorting anything, remind you to change filters. I think AI could have a really important role to play in just optimizing and easing, making living completely frictionless. I even think about, from the street to your home, how could that be even smoother? You walk up to your building and it just facially recognize who you are, and it just open the door for you, and you walk up towards your flat and only the lights you need come on, really optimizing energy. I think AI could really do wonders in that field. So, and also 3D printing, I'm really excited about, there clearly are skills, as you mentioned, a skills and training sort of hole, especially since Brexit. We've lost quite a lot of skill, and but I can really see 3D printing kind of. They're already, I think, in China. I've seen machines that 3D print whole houses. I can just see that sort of just developing and becoming a thing. Robots that lay bricks, perhaps, I don't know, but that would be a really safe site, wouldn't it? Like human beings out of harm's way. You just press a button and your whole structure gets printed out. Yeah,
like the orchestra plays, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I can see that coming. Maybe not next year, the year after, but on those timelines, 10, 20 years, absolutely can see it. The rate at which technology is self-improving almost at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if even in 10 years we were doing a lot more. We'd have construction sites with much fewer people on. So, so just a few ideas there for you.
there's a couple of things that I just want to follow up with as that you mentioned there. You mentioned about standards or performance gaps because perhaps the structure hasn't been built to the standard that it should have been built to, essentially, and you end up with this gap, right? And that's quite common, right? It's human error. I mean, there are multiple factors, right? But if we just call it human error. When you mentioned there about potentially, AI, robotics coming in onto the building site and delivering these homes,
Yeah.
your margin for error and therefore potentially presumably your performance gap becomes a lot smaller, right? Because you don't have that element. This passive house is a concept that is being delivered, but it's the boots on the ground really that are delivering the actual tangible thing.
That's right. Yeah.
As I'm thinking this through, though, there is part of me that thinks if we are going to go down that route, which no doubt I believe we will, where we've got robots essentially building everything, what do you do with all the people?
Yeah.
And that's another conversation that we could talk about for hours.
100%. Yeah.
And the other thing that I wanted to mention there is sort of your average Joe blogs that make, listen like me, right? That's listening to this podcast, and we're talking about changing the way that homes are built, what they're sort of made up of, and things like that. Aesthetically, do you see the sort of average home changing? The way it looks, the way it is. Do you see it being completely different to what it is now?
I don't think completely different, and I say that with coming from it, having sort of worked on a bunch of schemes now that are following this passive house approach. But there are differences, definitely. You'll start to see perhaps smaller windows than what we've been used to as an industry. The temptation's always been, full height glazing, because aesthetically it looks nice, etc. But when you're in a world of building physics and solar gains and optimization, etc., I think we will be seeing smaller windows to apartments, buildings being designed very orientation specific. So south and west facades being a lot more shaded, a lot more consideration given to balcony positions, so they inherently provide more and more shading. The way the window operates, so they can be fully opened and you can fully ventilate, that kind of thing. We might start to see. I mean, we haven't got there yet because we haven't needed to. But I suspect if weathers get even hotter, the weather starts to get even hotter, we may start to see things like external shading. Shutters and things as well. So, I mean, we're approaching it with brise-soleil at the moment, but I think I can definitely see there being a future with movable shutters on the outside to prevent the heat from coming in day one. There's no point in having a blind on the inside because the heat's already inside. So much more external shading devices to kind of prevent heat coming in. I think also there'll probably be a lot more care given to orientation of buildings from the outset, so that so they're optimized for the site. I think there will be, but not a huge difference from what I've seen. Fundamentally the buildings are the same. It takes a little bit more effort to design well-proportioned buildings because your windows are a little bit smaller. They used to do all the heavy lifting, and now we may have to do it through sort of architectural detailing, perhaps a little bit more. But then, because the external fabric is so fundamental to the performance of the building, what we don't want to do is introduce loads of architectural detail for the sake of it. So I think there'll be, going forwards, a lot more simplification of buildings. But in contrast, we will be dialing up things like public realm, because you could have the most beautiful building in the world, but if your master plan doesn't work, then that place is going to be awful. But but you can have good buildings that don't have to win awards. But if your public realm is brilliant, your human experience is therefore going to be so much better, then that place is going to be successful. So I think there'll be a slight rebalancing over, there'll be more of an intersection of ambition and pragmatism. So, I don't think the two things are competing things anymore. The ambition will be to do really performant buildings, but very pragmatically. And I think that is where we're going to be as an industry going forwards. Notwithstanding the build cost inflation that we've been experiencing, that also feeds into that whole equation.
I suppose it's you mentioned about the balance, but we want to build efficiently, we want to build sustainably, and we want to build homes that we think the lifetime of the home, as you mentioned earlier, not just to point this out. But then there is the architectural side as well, the design, right, and the beauty of art, and balancing those two things.
So I'm not advocating that buildings should be overly simplistic and just be boxes with punch windows in. Maybe that's definitely not where we should get to. And again, this is where there will always be a role for architects and humans. AI is not gonna solve everything. So the proportions of things will be different, but it will be the skill of the architect to use the tools that he's got to put them together in such a way that you can't put them together any better. And that for me has always been the definition of beauty anyway. And that's kind of something that I've carried with me since I was very early days in architecture. That it's not for us as architects to just stamp on what we think taste should be. It's what our job really is to deliver the brief, and the brief is complicated. Commercial reality is a thing. There's no point in being, sticking on loads of stuff onto your building and it not being able to be delivered because it's cost too much. So the skill of the architect is really to identify where it is important to spend a bit of money. That tends to be at the lower levels where people genuinely experience a building, and putting together, all of the ambition, all of those the constraints as well, until you can't put them together any better. And once you've done that, I'm happy, as long as we've thought through it all. And I guess there's no substitution for good proportion. So again, good architects will understand good proportion. It'll come naturally to them. They'll look at something and be able to make design decisions quite rapidly as to why, that building looks like needs a story off, or there needs to be a bit of a difference between this building and this building. But the need to simplify buildings is going to be there. Having overly articulate buildings, it will just it's not synonymous with a fabric first approach. We really need to move towards simpler buildings, but well proportioned buildings, and spending money where it's really important and adds to the human experience, which tends to be at the ground floor.
Well, there you go. So any architects hoping to work with us, you've just been given the brief there.
That's it. There you go. I think there'll be some very unhappy architects with me as well after that.
Yeah, you'll have a few that are very quickly changing their business model.
Yeah, oh God. But there's room for every kind of architect. We need the Zahas as well in the world, but volume housing at scale, delivering affordable housing, these are fundamentally important things. And I think these are solutions we need to embrace to carry on delivering good homes for people. So, this is, I'll leave you with that.
As that is a great way to round it off, and I really appreciate and respect the way you've come on and explained the journey and the timeline, and it's been genuinely really enjoyable and fascinating to hear about.
Brilliant.
And I really look forward to seeing these things actually, exist.
Me too, absolutely. And hopefully I haven't waffled on too much, but yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it as well.
We're just under an hour, so the fact that you've managed to get all of that in so coherently within an hour is impressive. So,
didn't feel like it, but yeah, hopefully it's come across. Yeah, amazing.
Thank you, Az.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on the show, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you so much.